This episode of EMS One-Stop is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's Lexipol.com.
Saving lives begins with kindness. That is my motto. It is my philosophy. Saving lives begins with kindness. I think that EMS has suffered from an identity problem, and I think they have lost their way in their mindsets on the job as a culture. We have become a culture that has been increasingly taken in by toxicity. And I think that we need to return to a time where EMS is known for their kindness and their compassion and for their holistic care.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of EMS One-Stop. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and the purpose of today's vodcast and podcast is communicating, is getting your point across, and of course influencing people. And there's only one person out there in the blogosphere and the Twitter sphere, and that's my guest for today, Jimmy Apple. Jimmy, you're all over social media. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here.
And so Jimmy, of course, is the EMS Avenger. And by way of an introduction, rather than ask you to introduce yourself, Jimmy, I actually asked Chat, because of course that's our go-to thing. AI is the thing of the day right now.
Right.
And here's what Chat said about you, and it'll be on screen. Jimmy Apple, also known as the EMS Avenger, is a prominent EMS influencer and paramedic educator. Who is he? A pediatric critical care paramedic with over 20 years of EMS experience. Jimmy works in high acuity settings and frequently shares his expertise. He's known online as the EMS Avenger, building a strong presence on platforms like TikTok and Instagram under that alias. Is that you, sir?
That is me. Yeah.
That is you. And so many people now are following you. You've got over 60,000 followers on TikTok and I'm sure other social media channels. But before we get into that, give us the Jimmy Apple backstory. How did you get into this mad business we call EMS?
Well, I was an electrician originally, and I was a pretty good electrician, I think, and it was a good trade, an honorable trade. I was good at it, but I just kind of backed into it. I didn't really pick it for myself. I had a conversation with my grandfather when he was dying of cancer, and it felt like that he never really got to do what he set out to do in his life. He wanted to be an agricultural veterinarian. World War II broke out. He came back from World War II. He had to hit the ground running and provide for his family. So he went to work for his father's plumbing company, eventually took over that business. But when we were talking about that, I was like, wow, I don't want to be on my deathbed and look back and think my whole life was spent just doing something that I just kind of backed into. And I became so unstuck from my own reality that I was literally haunted on a daily basis. And I wanted to do something that was meaningful, that was a positive influence within society, that benefited society. I wanted what I did on a daily basis to mean something. Not that tradesmen aren't doing anything meaningful, but I wanted to do something more. So I took an EMT course thinking I could just volunteer within my community. But I understood it immediately when we started getting into pathophysiology. It made so much sense to me, and it turned on a love of learning, and I just never looked back after that.
Well, first of all, it's interesting that my own home team, Prodigy, are about to issue some scholarships to EMS conferences and learning events. And one of the sort of qualifying questions was, tell us your backstory. Tell us that one thing that got you into EMS. And, there's that one life-threatening or that one emotional or emotive experience that people have that then drive them into doing what we do, which, of course, essentially is caring for others. And there's another example, and it's obviously fascinating of what drives us into EMS. So as we move on, then you're into EMS and sort of describe for us. And again, of course, we see you, the EMS Avenger, but of course, I'm just trying to sort of expose the guy behind the camera, as it were. So, take us through that career of getting to where you are now clinically.
So I always was an absorber of information and someone who seemed to be able to absorb information and then package it and then put it back out in a very explainable way. And I would say that, for the people that will offer me compliments on how smart I am, that sort of thing. I think the talent really is simply knowing what to do with information. And so I was always known locally as someone who students like to ride with, and they called me affectionately Dr. Apple in the area, just somebody who just was always learning, learning, learning. And that was, 20 something years ago. So right when social media was really starting to take off, when Facebook hit. And so that love of learning and the love of explaining naturally flowed through me onto social media. I'm very introverted by nature, and social media is a godsend to introverts because introverts do have things that they want to say. They just don't want to say it in person in front of a bunch of people. So, not that, I don't want to do that. I speak at conferences all the time. But so I started just putting out things on social media, excuse me. And then I wanted to do a podcast. I mentioned to Ginger Locke with Medic Mindset that I wanted to do a podcast. And she asked me, what are you going to do in a podcast that no one else is doing? And she shut me down with that question. I had no good answer for that. And so I just worked social media endlessly until TikTok landed. And my daughter started sending me funny videos from TikTok. And so at one point I installed the app and I was like, you know what? There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of EMS providers that are on this app all day long who have not kept up with their education after they've gotten out of paramedic school. And what if I just got a minute of content in front of them a couple of times a day? And so I just turned my phone around and started talking about the things that I've always been talking about. And the rest is history.
My day is already made. You name dropped one of my co-workers at Prodigy, Ginger Locke, who is an amazing mind with the amazing mindset. We were only recording yesterday with the EMS Educator podcast, and I can't wait for everybody to hear that. But if there's someone that's going to get you into doing this, that's the right person. So we love you,
Yes,
Ginger, first of all.
absolutely. She's been a friend and a mentor throughout this whole thing.
Fantastic. So, of course, what you hit on there is the way that we now consume all of our lives. It's in minute sound bites. It's on, the swipe on social media, and you have mastered that. And so, one of the things that I've certainly discovered from broadcasting and writing over the years is really how to be concise, how to fit everything into that 1 minute or that 1 minute 30 seconds when you've got the sound bite. I mean, how are you taking what's the trick to taking such a complex subject and then, as someone once said to me, compressing it down onto a bumper sticker? What's the process?
Well, you said it yourself. You have to be concise, and so you really have to package something down to its bare essence. The trade-off to that is there's some nuance lost, right? And in the process, you also have to have something that grabs someone's attention. It's funny that you asked that because I received a comment on the video that I made today. It's a video that I recorded with Dr. Peter Antevi about spray-dried plasma. And I reeled people in to that video by saying, are we going to be getting rid of normal saline and lactated ringers? I got a comment from someone on there that really didn't like that. They felt like that was misleading, that we weren't really going to get rid of normal saline or lactated ringers. But I think that generations before me, or generations that aren't really on social media much or don't use it for much, don't understand that paradigm. There has to be some things that are bombastic and even a little clickbaity to get people in the door. You've got seconds to keep people's attention, and so you really have to know how to deliver people what they think that they're going to get immediately, and then keep them on the hook. And I think that's the trick to what me and others are doing. And you have to be genuine and authentic as well.
So actually, let me give you a little challenge then. Obviously, this is going to be a longer form podcast, but and also a vodcast. So what's the 20-second Jimmy Apple intro to get people to listen to this?
To get to listen to this podcast?
To listen to this podcast, and I'll put it on the front end of the broadcast.
You are going to get insight into a content creator where normally you would get 2 seconds to make your decision as to who and what I am and what I'm doing, and you're actually going to get a lot of nuance behind what I'm doing right now and fill in a lot of blanks that you may not have had before.
There we go. So thank you for that. This will also appear at the start of the podcast. And communication is an interesting thing. And of course, one of the things that we've been doing is this series called On the Escalator With, right, where we start at the top and we go down. And you have literally 25 seconds to answer the question. And it's a great exercise in communication skill. And it's also a great exercise in how clearly can you express an opinion in that short time. Just like I did with you there, I asked the question, you gave me the answer. Not everybody can do that, and so obviously what you're doing is superb. Now, in terms of the top, so obviously that's the sort of background to how you become concise. How do you select the topics? Is it literally the sort of topic of the day? Do you have a whole list of things? Are you waiting for something to drop in the news, looking at the latest academic peer-reviewed paper? What's the Jimmy Apple process there?
Yes, to all that.
Great answer.
Yeah, I do have a list in my phone of topics that I want to get to. And then there are studies that are always coming out, papers that are always coming out, new products or innovations that are always coming out. I'm well connected enough in the industry at this point that something that's new is just going to be on my social media timeline. Someone's going to put it there. And so, every morning there's something that's like, that's interesting. Just yesterday, I was reading a study about the transplant of islet cells in the pancreas into the liver so that they would actually create insulin to type 1 diabetics. And I was like, ooh, that's really cool. I'm going to put that on my list and I'll talk about that later. I will just Google new EMS studies and see what pops up. And then I may have a conversation with a coworker over something, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to create some content on that. Sometimes a patient presentation delivers it. And then I'm just intensely curious. There's things that I want to know that I'll go down a Google rabbit hole on, and then I'll just produce the findings of what I found as a video. And then there's enough people that are contacting me on a daily basis asking for specific content. I will say that I have to find my way into it. And so if somebody just says, can you do a video on, I don't know, thyroid storm? If it's not interesting to me, there is no amount of effort that can get me to make that video until I've found the hook that gets me in there.
That's fascinating. And so, what is right now the hot topic from peer review, academic research that you've seen? What's the hot topic of the month then?
The hot topic of the month. Well, there was a study that just came out on cricothyrotomy that was indicating the success rates for cricothyrotomy versus needle, or surgical cricothyrotomy versus needle cricothyrotomy. A lot of people are talking about that. People are always talking about TXA right now. People are always talking about ketamine. And of course, patients or provider safety is a big topic right now, particularly because of the death of Graham Hoffman in Kansas City.
Yeah, so some hot topics there, and we'll hopefully get some links there in the show notes. Provider safety is something that I look at very, very closely, and we have a product that a news, actually it might be of interest to you. We have a news product that we produce every day. It's called emsintel.org, where we actually harvest all of the EMS related news, and it's a collaboration between the American Ambulance Association and AIM High, the International Academy of Mobile Healthcare Integration, where we're actually harvesting all of the news under its original news source. So we love EMS One, we're broadcasting on EMS One, but if you're an elected official or a journalist, you don't want a whole list of EMS One items. We actually take it back to the actual document or the news source, and then we can categorize it and then send it back in terms of whether it's response time, whether it's finance issues. But of course, one of the things that I major on is provider safety. The parlous state of ambulance crashes. We can't say accidents anymore. My soapbox item, Jimmy, that once, and you might want to do one on this, once every 2 weeks in the United States of America, an ambulance is stolen. And where is that ambulance stolen from? A hospital. And actually, for $100, you can fix that with a device. But every 2 weeks in the news, I have here we go again. Need to broadcast that one. So
there's a service in my area that when they bring a patient to a hospital, they just go in the hospital with their back doors open. And I'm like, how could you possibly do this at this point in time? Who has not read an article about an ambulance being stolen?
Ah,
Nobody wants to
yeah.
be that guy.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes. My EMS One article, "Respond in 8 minutes, gone in 60 seconds." It's there. I probably need to update it because I predicted that unless we do something, an ambulance will be stolen every 2 weeks. We haven't done anything, and an ambulance is still stolen every 2 weeks. So it's a thing. Now, you're a great communicator, and one of the work that I'm doing around trying to tell our story, either long form or in on film, is a challenge because every time we go somewhere, whether it's with a journalist or whether it's with an elected official, we have to tell our story over and over again. So, how can an EMS agency do what you do, perhaps not to such a wide audience or an extent, but obviously to their local audience? What are the kind of startup tips that you'd offer somebody?
That's a really good question because not every service or individual, I mean, you just have to be blunt. Not every service or individual has the tools
Right,
and the
fair comment.
capabilities to do this. There is, I'm not going to name the names, but there is a journal that has a channel on TikTok right now that every time I see their videos pop up, I'm like, this is the wrong person doing this with the wrong filter, the wrong background, the wrong environment, and people hold their phones like this when they're watching content, right? And so they are poised to do that swipe. And so the content that you have to make is something that's going to stop the finger. And so you do have to be a good communicator. You have to know how to front load the content with something that's going to stop the finger. And then you have to have an audience that wants to see it. So if you're an ambulance service that has 20 employees, there's no ups there's you're not going to get any bang for your buck for having a social media channel. If you are a larger service, then perhaps you will get something out of that. But you also have to remember that some of the larger services do tend to attract negative attention. And so it may not even be in your best interest to be on social media in that way. Your content also has to be something that can be validated. And so if you're a service that's trying to promote company policy at the expense of evidence based medicine, I'm going to get a hold of it and I'm going to call you out on social media. And then you're going to shut your social media channel down because you realized it was a bad idea. So I would say that it is much better to point your people towards good information rather than doing a bad job at trying to put bad information out.
Those are exceptionally wise words, actually, and it's interesting that your comment about an organization needs to do that kind of value proposition discussion calculation over, are we going to just bring more fire upon ourselves if we do this versus actually by staying silent and in the background. It's something that I certainly hadn't considered in a major way, but I guess there is that kind of strategic tactical decision that you have to make, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So let's just take a second before we carry on and have a quick word from our sponsor.
Lexipol empowers first responders and public servants to best meet the needs of their residents safely and responsibly. Serving more than 2 million public safety and government professionals in over 8,000 agencies and municipalities, Lexipol offers a range of solutions that includes policies, training, behavioral health resources, news and analysis, and grant assistance services for law enforcement, fire and rescue, EMS, local government, and other agencies dedicated to public safety. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com.
And we're back. And as I always say, that was the voice of Jim Dudley over on Police One with Policing Matters. If you get a second, take a second to either watch or listen to Jim because he has some amazing guests from the world of police and indeed public safety. Also, please make sure that you like and subscribe. Don't forget that we're on YouTube and also on wherever you get your podcast from. So you can listen to us or watch us. And again, I tell you this every week that if you watch us, of course, there's the added bonus of charts, graphs, our faces, and sometimes it's the webinar you didn't even know you needed. So please make sure you like and subscribe. So I'm having a discussion here with the EMS Avenger himself. Jimmy Apple. We've talked about a little bit of his backstory, a little bit about his motivations, and obviously the things you need to think about if you're going to do this for yourself. Jimmy, one of the things I love about your output is that you're not afraid to call people out. You're not afraid to identify when something isn't quite right out there in the social media world. And there's some folk that are broadcasting stuff that's either, dare I say, fake news, or that's just clinically inaccurate, or is, so sensationalist that it needs someone, perhaps not somebody with the official sort of rank bars, medals and pips on, to actually call them out. And you've been doing that really, really well. So, any sort of examples of that, because I think that, you do a great job doing that.
Well, the most recent thing I did was something that's kind of taken over social media to a degree, and that is a nurse who made a video saying that she flexed her nurse by essentially bullying her way into the back of an ambulance on the way to a call, and then she kind of publicly humiliated a trainee who was in the back on the trainee's capabilities. I have been actually attempting to throttle back some of the call out videos because ultimately what I want is for better information to be out there and not for someone to be humiliated. But the airing out of the trainees' perceived failures really, really bothered me, particularly when she bragged literally in the text of the video that she was a protector of learners. And so I dissected her video and kind of pointed out the hypocrisy there. And that person essentially just deleted their entire social media presence. That is why I am attempting to be a lot more careful with the call out videos, because I think that any individual is capable of a ready, fire, aim moment. And we probably all have, anywhere between 2 to 20 of them throughout the day. And any of those could just be blasted publicly on social media, and we are simply, there's this scorched earth behind us after that. But I do believe in taking on bad information and dogma. And so when I do see creators putting bad information out there, I think it's important to analyze that information and put out the evidence. And my goals going forward are to support people who are acting in good faith while correcting the misinformation.
That's great, and thank you for highlighting that. As you go forward, obviously, I can see that your following and your audience is growing. Obviously, that means that you have the greater ability to spread the good word, sometimes the corrective word on EMS channels. But sort of, where are you right now in terms of the platforms that you're on and sort of the audience that you're reaching?
So I started on TikTok, and I have about 70,000 followers there, which I think is pretty respectable considering the lane that I occupy. There are some EMS creators that have hundreds of thousands of followers, but a lot of that is built on lifestyle, humor, slice of life type activity that is much more relatable across the entire cross section of EMS. So I stay in my lane, and I think that's a pretty respectable following considering. I'm also on Instagram, and I learned going from TikTok to Instagram that there may be a little bit more of a level of sophistication there and a little bit more level of scrutiny. And it was actually a good experience to help me really tighten up my thought processes in some of this content, in double checking sources and that sort of thing. I am on Facebook as well. I had a presence there just to kind of satisfy just having a presence there. I didn't use it for much. It was just a group. But in another professional endeavor that I had, that where I was recruited by a social media kind of like headhunter that looks for talent to match to people that are looking to pair up for advertising, that sort of stuff. Yeah. They requested that I have an official Facebook presence, so we created a Facebook page. I threw some reels there that were just clipped from TikTok and put them there, and it blew up over the last 3 months, and it has become something that it is as much to manage as TikTok is now. I'm very gratified by that, but I am doing a lot more on Facebook right now, and that is particularly challenging because it is a context where there is a lot more freedom for deeper discussions there. And so there are people who are on Facebook that are not necessarily there going through reels, that are just scrolling their timeline, who might see a reel and don't really understand the context in which these reels are delivered, the brevity that has to be there, and some of the sacrifices to nuance that have to be there. So it's a pretty challenging platform to be on.
And it seems like, and I follow you on Facebook, for example, it seems like, again, that reel is drawing my attention to the topic, then the comments start. And, there are professional Facebook commenters, let me tell you probably realize that out there. And
yes,
they who can comment will. But of course, there is some great points, some great pearls, and some great discussions that happen out there, and also, and that must kind of inspire you and prompt, sometimes frustrate you perhaps, but also prompt you into either responding or creating something that's going to address the concern or indeed address the knowledge gap.
I don't get too frustrated with the comments. I learned early on to kind of like emotionally detach yourself from the comments. However, I think that you will draw the comments, generally speaking, you will draw the engagement that you're looking for. And so if you're putting content out in good faith, generally speaking, you will get good faith engagement. And my policy is not to engage with any comments that are not made in good faith. And so if somebody, there are people who may have a very passionate response, but you can see that they have a genuine point to make. That's fine. I'll engage with that. And I always try to respond with kindness. But then there are people that, while the subject that you're discussing does exist in the comment really is just a person communicating to you, I don't like you, so I'm going to poop in your comments here. And so I will not engage with it, and I'll probably delete it. And I think that process has helped me create a very positive culture within my space. And so I'm actually pretty happy with that.
And actually, again, there's some great advice there about people that get caught into that kind of descending spiral of social media commentary. And so some great advice there. And yes, there is that positivity. Jimmy, as we come to the end, I ask one sort of question to all of my guests. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you, or anything that you need to tell, certainly the EMS One audience out there?
Saving lives begins with kindness. That is my motto. It is my philosophy. Saving lives begins with kindness. I think that EMS has suffered from an identity problem, and I think they have lost their way in their mindsets on the job as a culture. We have become a culture that has been increasingly taken in by toxicity. And I think that we need to return to a time where EMS is known for their kindness and their compassion and for their holistic care. That is not to say that people are not suffering because of the conditions that we work in, but it is to say that we are responsible for ourselves and how we respond to it. And I believe that we need to respond to everything that is happening in the world today with kindness.
That's a beautiful summary of everything that I certainly hope to do, and I'm watching you as you help us do that too. So, Jimmy Apple, thank you for joining me on EMS One-Stop. I'm certainly going to follow you. I'm going to put in the notes everywhere where everyone can follow you along as well, and a couple of links for some of the papers that you talked about. So, sir, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and EMS Avenger, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
So that was this week's EMS One-Stop with my guest and influencer, Jimmy Apple, aka the EMS Avenger. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, follow on all of Jimmy's platforms, because the content he puts out is absolutely remarkable. So that's it for this week. We'll see you next week. Please make sure that you like and subscribe at the EMS One-Stop. Make sure that you watch us on YouTube or listen to us wherever you get your podcast from. So for the moment, my guest was Jimmy Apple. I've been Rob Lawrence. And until next time, bye for now.